This is Jennifer Gonzalez welcoming you to episode 207 of the Cult of Pedagogy podcast. In this episode, we're going to look at a youth boxing program that is changing lives in Chicago. It's called the Bloc. I remember listening to a conversation once between two men I taught middle school with. Some of the details are fuzzy now, but I still remember the gist of it. I think both were classroom teachers and both were coaches of our school's football team. Midterm grade reports had just come out, and they were talking about one kid, a player on the team, who was failing one of his classes. According to the team's policies, the student was supposed to face disciplinary action for this grade, something that amounted to being removed from the team temporarily with the threat of permanent removal if the grade was not brought up. Both teachers were clearly struggling with the situation. One of them said to me, "If we're going to have a policy like this, we have to enforce it or it means nothing. But if he loses football, all of his grades are going to go down. It's the only thing keeping him on track." I still don't remember what they decided to do. Part of me thinks they made an exception, either negotiating with the teacher in question to arrange enough makeup work or extra credit to raise the grade, or just looking the other way for this one student one time. But the conversation, the conflict these teachers were having illustrates a much larger problem. In most schools, extracurriculars are used as a carrot to get students to perform academically and behaviorally. The assumption is that all students need is the right motivation, something they love enough to make them want to do well in school. If they choose not to do well, they lose the thing they love. I think most people who work within this system hope that they never have to actually enforce these policies, that they will work as intended and get students to do what they need to do. But when they don't work, then what? What happens to the kids who are turned away from extracurriculars, away from the very activities that would help them thrive? This is the question a young Chicago teacher named Jamyle asked himself about a decade ago. When he started a basketball team at his school and had to turn away dozens of students for their grades and behavior, he immediately saw a flaw in the way extracurriculars are usually run. When programs like these turn kids away, they cut them off from the relationships, support, structure, and mentoring those activities usually offer, factors that are often essential for achievement in schools. This realization prompted him to try again with a different approach. He started a club where kids could come and learn the fundamentals of boxing, a sport Cannon himself had been very successful in, and this time he didn't turn students away. By the end of that first year, even though he hadn't implemented any kind of grade policy, the grades of all students in the club had gone up. Cannon's Little Boxing Club has now grown into a full-blown nonprofit that currently serves hundreds of students on Chicago's West Side. While the core activity of this after-school program is boxing, it offers so much more to students, like academic support, mentoring, field trips, facilities and technology for learning, even a food pantry. Students in the program who attend schools in the surrounding neighborhoods have a 100% graduation rate and an average GPA of 3.2. The name of the program is the Bloc, and in this episode, I'm going to talk with Jamyle about how and why this program works as well as it does. It is my hope that the story of Jamyle and the Bloc will offer a model for other educators, a different path forward in the way we look at extracurriculars. Before we get started, I'd like to thank EverFi for sponsoring this episode. Everyone remembers that teacher, the study hall teacher who walked you through your first college application, the social studies teacher who taught you what taxes were and how to file them, the math teacher who used student loans to show you how interest worked. You can be that teacher, and EverFi wants to help you make that kind of impact with free digital lessons for K-12 students. From budgets and banking to credit and savings, you'll find a financial literacy topic that's right for your classroom. And especially during April, Financial Literacy Month, there's no better time to equip students with smart decision-making around finances. Learn how you can share these free resources with students and give them a financial foundation that lasts a lifetime. To learn more, go to cultofpedagogy.com/everfi. That's EVERFI. Support also comes from Giant Steps, a brand new collaborative, inclusive, and engaging way for students to practice in class and beyond. Teamwork is at the heart of your K-12 classroom, so Giant Steps gives all students a chance to succeed, not just the fastest fingers. Giant Steps is a free, gamified digital learning experience that boosts collaboration and independent practice. Designed with learning science and research in mind, students will love playing and you'll love the results. Foster growth mindset, motivation, and a positive learning community with Giant Steps. Create your free account at giantsteps.app. That's GIANTSTEPS.app. Now, here is my conversation with Jamyle Cannon, Executive Director of the Bloc Chicago. So, Jamyle Cannon, welcome so much to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
So, I'm going to ask you a lot of detailed questions about the Bloc, but let's just do like that the elevator, pitch. Just give my listeners, if you can, just a very brief overview. What is the Bloc, and how has it positively impacted the lives of the students in the program?
Absolutely. So, if you're a kid on Chicago's West Side and I ask you to join a mentoring or tutoring program, your answer is probably going to be no. But if I ask you to join a boxing program, you're much more likely to say yes. And then we get an opportunity to create a relationship with you that's going to provide so many resources and opportunities in your life. So, kids say yes to us because of the sport of boxing. And we are able to then work with them on an individual level to provide, I think, the resources and opportunities that all kids deserve. So, young people who come to us have academic support. They have one-on-one check-ins with caring adults. We go on field trips. We've been to, uh, in the past couple of months, the University of Notre Dame. We went to a carpentry center. They're just getting out and about all the time. And we have enrichment programs as well, where young people are doing things like learning to garden and cook food, learning computer science. There's a chess club. That the world of opportunities we're able to offer up because they've said yes to the idea of fighting somebody is really impactful. And I think kids who line up to fight, those are kids we need to be talking to, and they're often kids who are rejected and pushed aside. So I think it's important for us that we embrace those young people so that they can have the same opportunities as everyone else. So every single young person who's come through our program has graduated high school and been accepted into college since 2016. Our fighters are ended the school year with an average GPA of 3.2 or higher every year. Last year was a 3.3. We have an 83% college matriculation rate for this past year's seniors, and they're happy. I think that's a really important point. Like 90% of kids who come to our program come back for another session. They recommend it to their friends. They show up with a crew because this is something that's really important to them, and they want so many kids to have it. And to me, that's the most important metric. If kids are happy, they're gonna be all right.
Yeah. So it's an after school program, and the primary activity, even though you just listed a bunch of other stuff you do, is boxing.
Absolutely, and
That's
I
the
think it's
draw.
important. Yeah, it's important. So many times we plan activities and programs around what adults think kids should be doing, when in reality, kids are telling us what they want to do all the time. And I think there's an initial recoiling act that comes along with the idea of youth boxing, and I think there should be. You should scrutinize that idea, but it's really important to recognize a couple of things. One, we're going to approach this sport in a way that is going to be to minimize the harm that's being caused to young people. And the second thing that I think folks need to realize is kids are out there fighting. They're out there. They're getting in fights with one another. They're fighting in schools, and they need a much more productive outlet than what they've been using so far. So kids come to us because they want to fight, and I think it's important we talk to them.
So I'm going to dig for other details and a little bit more of the logistical stuff, but let's sort of go back to the beginning. You started out as a language arts teacher, correct?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And so you kind of started, there was this early iteration of this where you tried to start like a basketball kind of club basically at this school, and it didn't go so great. And then you sort of tried again with boxing. So tell us a little bit about that history, and why did the second try take?
Yeah. So the idea around me becoming a basketball coach was just I needed a chance to interact with these young people outside of the school programs. But this was the first program that we had at that school. It was the first sports program, so many kids wanted to be a part of it. And so when 70 kids showed up to this tryout, I realized I can only keep 12. So we cut 58 kids, and I cut 58 kids thinking, you know what? Is that you got to be good enough, you got to have the grades, you got to have behavior to be a part of this program. I didn't think anything of it, but to watch some kids, like, one, become dejected, two, not reach their full potential, or spiral because they didn't have the relationship they were looking for. They were coming to me because they wanted a relationship.
Yeah.
They wanted to improve in a sport. They wanted to be mentored. They wanted to have positive peer-to-peer interactions. And I just said, no, you're not good enough for that.
Mm,
And that's what we're doing across the sector. We're putting up these barriers to entry. We're saying that you have to be good enough to participate in these enrichment activities. We have to be good enough to participate in the things that are good for us, and that blows my mind that we haven't rethought that. So,
yeah.
uh, I was a national champion boxer back in my day, and this is something that the kids in the school knew, and they were just
Mm,
kind of poking me about starting a boxing program at the school. And I thought that's the dumbest idea you could ever think of, but I started a boxing club inside my classroom, and we started off with just 12 kids. And I checked their grades at the end of the year, and they had grown to a 3.18 GPA. We got a little bigger the next year, and they grew to a 3.1, somewhere around a 3.2 GPA. And we just ended up getting so big that the school said, you can't do this here anymore. Kids are coming to
mm,
us from other neighborhoods. We had kids taking the train to get to us. We were becoming one of
oh,
the largest after school sports programs on the west side of Chicago. And it became to be too much of a logistical and operational hurdle for the school. And that's when I decided that I needed to start a nonprofit. And I, decided to leave my job in education, officially in
mm.
education, to go full time on this idea of using boxing as a youth development device.
I want to dig into this idea a little bit more because you brought up such an important point about this. You need to meet certain standards in order to stay in the thing that you're passionate about. And I see that all the time. And I have heard coaches in schools even talk about this, that it motivates kids to do better. It's a chicken and an egg thing, like this is what's going to motivate the kids to keep up the grades and keep the behavior so that they can stay in the extracurricular. And it sounds like what you're saying is it actually doesn't work that way. It's certainly not for every kid.
No, and it's a punishment that's unrelated to the action. And if we think about providing natural consequences to young people, the natural consequence of your action, if you are failing in a class at school, the natural consequence actually isn't a punishment to stop you from doing other things. The natural consequence is support. You get support
Mm,
when that happens.
mm,
And we often look at kids and we think like they're just not motivated enough, but that's just not the case. Young people are motivated to do well. They want to be their best selves, and we need to provide the space and the opportunities for them to do so. So the
mhm,
idea that punishing young people is a motivator, yeah, it's shown to be false across a range of settings, and it's no different when it comes to after school activities. And what we're finding is the longer we have a young person in our program, the better their academic results, the better their behavioral results, the better their social emotional learning becomes, and the more confidence they have.
mm.
So if we are only creating programs for kids who are good enough, for kids who are smart enough, for kids who have the grades, we are intentionally removing the kids who need us most
Mm.
from our sphere of influence.
The assumption is you already have the tools and the skills to do well. We just need you to want to, and then you're naturally going to be able to do it. So we're going to hold this carrot out, and that's not it. They need all that support in order to learn how to do better.
And the idea that they have the tools that they need to do well is actually true. They have everything that they need to do well. They need the space in order to bring that out. They sometimes need some additional resources so that's possible. Sometimes we have to change our metrics. Like, what are we looking for this kid to do well
Mm,
in?
mhm,
Because it's like a fish is never going to win a tree climbing competition.
mhm.
But when we're looking at kids from a strengths based perspective, we can see
Right.
like, these kids are great at a lot of things, and maybe we can stop judging them by someone else's standards.
Yeah, and I want to sort of rewind and make sure that I'm clear about what I was saying when I said they don't have the tools. I didn't necessarily mean internally, but sort of the external resources, because I
Yeah,
don't want to come at it from a deficit mindset either.
no, I
Yeah.
understand that completely. I just want to kind of turn it a little bit.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when you first started the boxing within your classroom in the school, and you said just even that first year, the GPA started to go up, you were not enforcing any kind of a consequence. It just sort of organically happened, or were you also adding some study time along with the boxing?
We actually didn't have any study time. We had no academic interventions at all. It was we were just boxing and kicking it. And what we
Okay.
found was there were young people who started to have a more positive relationship with the school. Started
Mm,
to want to do better. Started to show up to school more often, and because they had something good to look forward to. And it's amazing, how much having something good can change your day and make you more willing and able to learn at that point. Now, what we did find is, so these kids freshman and sophomore year, we're seeing these gains. Junior year, kids start getting into honors and AP classes, and we started seeing grades fall. So our GPA actually went down in year 3 of our programs, because they were getting in classes that actually a lot of them weren't necessarily prepared for. They were just super motivated when they
yeah.
were going into these classes. So that's when we started bringing in academic support. We had some volunteer tutors come to help some young people, do homework and make plans to, organize your day so that you can do your homework, and then support them with some of the hands-on technical support that they needed with subject specific
I think
classes.
that's a good sign. They were taking on bigger academic challenges, so
Yeah, and
that'll happen.
that they were academically confident enough to do that, and motivated enough to get their way into those classes, and we just needed to make sure that they didn't sink when they got there.
Yeah. So you have now a physical facility
Yeah.
near where your school was? This is in the west side of Chicago?
So we're on the west side of Chicago. We're a few
Mhm.
miles away from where our school was, but we actually have a transportation program where we're going and picking kids up and bringing them to us. So we have a critical mass of young people who are coming from the school where I started this organization,
Mm.
and then kids from all over the west side of Chicago. We renovated a 10,000 square foot church. So we brought in some kids. We had to hammer out some pews and take down altars and stages. I'm glad we didn't get it on video. Some people would be very upset. But uh, kids actually came in, young people came in and helped build the boxing ring, helped set up the heavy bags, helped create this space, and it just gave them a whole new sense of pride in what they were working on. So, we have art in our building. So there's a Liz Flores piece, a beautiful piece. It's in a strength and conditioning room, and we have 10 to 18-year-olds in their training, and nobody ever touches the art. Nobody.
Mm.
You can run your hand underneath any desk or table. You're not going to run into any gum, and we don't have rules. We never talked about not doing those things. We have co-created a space that they value, and we treat them with love and respect, and they return that with the way that they treat our facilities, each other, and the personnel that we have.
I just was reading a thread this morning on Twitter about the idea of giving away pencils and notebooks and paper to kids, and the number of teachers that were chiming in about how in my school the kids just break it right in front of me and they step on the calculators, and I thought something is wrong at your
Yeah,
school.
that's a problem.
This is not the kids. Like something has gone horribly wrong with the culture of your school. And so what you're telling me is that you've got really, kind of valuable stuff in the building and they're not messing with it because they feel valued and they value the space. That's beautiful.
Yeah, we have one laptop for every 2 people in our building.
Mhm.
We they can use those laptops whenever they want to. We try to get the absolute best of everything. We don't just want to be good enough. I came up in
Right.
a lot of spaces that were just good enough for black and brown kids, and good enough actually is almost never good enough. So we try to get the best of what we can, the best equipment, the best educational supplies, the best facility, and they take care of it because I think they know that they are valued.
So this, I was going to ask this a little later, but let's just do it now because of what you're talking about is, and I mentioned this before we started recording, but I found you on TikTok. And so I know that on TikTok, you talk a lot about this stuff, the motivating of kids and the program. But then a lot of your other content has to do with being a nonprofit leader and working on that funding piece. And there's a lot of complicated stuff that we're not going to get into there. But How, I mean, you've clearly raised money very well and continue to raise money very well for this. And so I'm thinking people listening to this are thinking, I'd like to try to do something like this in my community. How big of a deal is the fundraising piece for you? How much of your week is spent on that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I'm fortunate to now have a director of development who that's the world that she lives in now. She's doing
Mm,
a great job. I think the most important thing early on is your programming and your fundraising kind of have to connect because you don't have time to do both of those things separately.
yeah.
So when I think of fundraising when we were first starting off, I wasn't running big elaborate fundraising campaigns. I was saying
Mm,
like, hey, you come in here and see what we're doing, work out with some kids, help a kid with their homework, give if you can, bring somebody back with you.
mm,
So the programming and the fundraising ran hand in hand. So I didn't have to step out of my role as the leader of these young people to fund it. It was actually doing the thing was what funded the organization. And then
mm,
using social media is something I've always been serious about. But using social media in the sense that I just need to show you all what we're doing. If I show you all what we're doing, then you're going to want to support it. If I show you that we just took a kid, took a bunch of kids on this college trip, that we're taking kids out to dinner, that we're experimenting with how to bring our heart rates down faster. If I show you all these little things that we're doing on our day to day, you're going to want to jump in and support us. So, to me, fundraising should be a more organic process and built on the relationships that you have with people. One of the things I think surprises people is when you give to the block, you have a really good chance of talking to me no matter how much you give, right? We had a call with a group of donors, about 20 donors. It's like you give $5, we're talking. You give
yeah.
$1,000, you're on the same call with a $5 person.
I mean,
So
I got a handwritten note from Amy, I think it was,
yeah,
and that was
yeah,
the first time that's ever happened. I could tell it wasn't a form letter, and I was like, "Wow, this is really nice." Yeah.
yeah. We are serious about connection. We that's something that runs through our entire organization. Connections with young people, connections between young people, connections with the people who are supporting our organization, and connections between the people who are supporting our organization. Connection is not, it's not a gimmick. It's something that we are
Yeah.
truly about. We want to know you, we want to love you, and we want you to love us in return.
Couple of logistical questions. So, students are there, they come straight from school, and you said you've got funding for transportation to come get them if they're not within walking distance. And how
Yep.
late do they stay?
So we have a couple of groups of students that roll through. So we have some young people, a younger group. They show up about 2:45 to get out of school early, 2:45, 3 o'clock, and they'll
Mm-hmm.
be there until about 5:15. We have another group of people that tend to be older, high school students. They show up at about 4:30, and they are there until about 6:30. So it's around 2 hours of programming for that group.
Okay.
They some kids come 5 days a week, so Monday through Thursday and Saturday. Some kids come
Mm-hmm.
3 days a week, so either Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And
Okay.
we run 10-week sessions, and every 10 weeks, a young person has the capability of signing up for the next 10 weeks, so they get first priority within that next group. So we're not about to us, it's not about like we need to reach more kids. It's like we have a natural stopping point where you get to make a decision about what's best for you. 90% of the kids within the school year are going to come back for more than one session. And
Yeah.
to me, that's the most important metric that we could possibly track because, like I said before, if kids are happy, if kids are doing something that they love, if they have a passion, then they're going to have great results, whatever that means
Mm-hmm.
for them.
Do you have to turn kids away? Like just out of
So,
pure capacity reasons?
right now, we do. We there's we have about a capacity for 160 people within the course of a 10-week session to be in our program. We've got a list of about 300 young people
Mm,
that in one way or another, and it may not be every session that they want to be a part of it, but 300 young people will say that they want to be a part of this program.
mm,
So we're working on changing that, fixing our capacity issue by expanding out into schools across the west side of Chicago. What we want to do is train teachers to teach the basics of boxing, the footwork, the punches, the blocks, and things of that nature. And we want to support those teachers along the way. We'll have a coordinator that shows up once or twice a week
mm,
to support them. They'll have an opportunity to come to our building once a week as well to get some instruction from the trainers and coaches. But we want to go to the young people where they are in the buildings in their resource rich environments with teachers who work at their schools, who know them and know the culture of that school, and we want to empower those teachers to implement our programming.
Wow. That's incredible growth considering you started this in 2016.
I'm excited about it because this essentially lifts the lid off of how much we can grow. You know, we no longer have a space constraint. Now it's about how many people want to do it. And if you
Right.
want to do it, we can figure out a way to make it happen for you within your school.
Do your kids, is it all in-house or do they actually compete somewhere? What's the, the
About
sort of
about
end point?
About 10% of our kids in our program compete. About 90% of them come in saying they want to compete,
Hmm.
but 10% of them, you know, it's hard. It's hard. I let them know from the very start, like, yeah, you don't quite know what you're asking for when you say you want to have a boxing match, right? You have no idea what you're saying to me right now. But we let them adjust their preferences. So when every kid comes in, they get an intake, and one of
Hmm.
the things we ask in that intake is, what do you know, why are you here? You know,
Right.
and some kids want to get in shape, some kids want to learn to defend themselves, some kids want to be world champions.
Mm.
Depending on what you want out of the sport, we can change your experience. Some kids, if you just want to get in shape, feel good about yourself, they'll work towards a mid-work session at the end of their training session, and they'll have a showcase where they've learned a combination. They're going to show off their mastery of that combination in front of folks.
Mm.
People who say they want to actually take a boxing match, they have a sparring showcase at the end where they basically, we have 16-ounce headgear, 16-ounce gloves. We put a couple of young people who are around the same level in the ring, and they have a short sparring match. And there are some young people who've already sparred who are going to go on and compete at the end of their 10 weeks. We do have a couple of Golden Glove champion boxers. We have a young man who was started with us as a freshman in high school, went on to become the national collegiate boxing champion.
Mm.
You know, if we're going to compete, we got to, you know, winning ain't everything, but it ain't nothing. So it's important that if we're going to do it, we do it well, because that's what's going to keep kids coming through the door.
Yeah. Let's talk for a minute because you kind of went through the list of sort of wraparound stuff that you do. And there's definitely like field trips and stuff like that. But I can't remember where I saw this. You've got screen printing, or is that just was that just a temporary thing?
So we have a rolling list of opportunities for young people, and whatever they're into, we try to figure out how to make it happen. So like some kids like, hey, we want to make some T-shirts. Okay, let's figure
Mm.
that out. So we found an expert. She's a master's fine art student who loves screen printing, has her own shop. And she came and spent Saturdays with a handful of our fighters. They created a design, digitized that design, and then printed that design on T-shirts. It was a fascinating process. And the shirt that they made, I can't wear anywhere. It says, "Get ready to catch these hands." It says, "I can't walk around with a threat."
You can wear it inside the building.
I can't wear it anywhere.
I love
Um,
that.
but we really want to follow student interest. But the interest we haven't been able to capitalize on just yet is music. We have
Hmm.
people who are interested in music instruments, also people who are interested in music production. So we're working on getting a partnership with one of these music studios to see if we can come up with a project for some of our young people to work on.
Nice.
uh, there are a couple things I'm really excited about and proud of. So our food club,
Hmm.
young people in the program started a garden. It was led by our program manager, Erica. They used the food from that garden to prepare snacks for kids in the organization.
Hmm.
Um, then, when the harvest season was over, they started preparing for a full course meal for their family and friends. So they spent 10 weeks working on one recipe. It was a very fancy recipe. It was like a shrimp and tofu burger on a rice bun or something along those lines, with jicama fries. And I was like, what are y'all? Like, who are you? Uh, so they worked 10 weeks on those recipes. And
Hmm.
then at the end of it all, they had their family and friends over for like a restaurant service. So, you know, you walked in, you got seated, and they, you know, let you know what was on the menu. They had a service. They were in the kitchen. It looked like a professional kitchen. We had Jamyle in the middle shouting out orders. They were yes chefing them all over the place. It was it's,
Oh,
things like that where young people have an opportunity to produce a product that they're proud of. Really, that makes me proud as well.
it sounds like your approach really is pay attention to the kids, get to know what they're interested, and then if you see a spark, see what you can do to help them really develop that in-house.
and run with it, right? Take
Right.
off running with it because that's where you're going to see them come alive. They're going to start finding themselves. We know that there are going to be very few, and I actually like, thankfully so, there are going to be very few people who come to this program who end up being professional boxers. They're going to go on
Mhm.
and do something else, and it's important for us to nurture their interests. And I think that's one of the things that's really missing across the not only across the sector, but particularly for kids on the west side of Chicago. If I am in an affluent area and I don't know, into dinosaurs, then I'm gonna be going to the zoo. I'm gonna be getting books. I'm gonna have so many resources related to dinosaurs. I'm gonna be able to dive into that and figure out what to do with this love of mine at some point in my life. But young people can have an interest and have no access to explore that interest, to develop it, to learn more about it, see if it's really for them. And to me, that's just such a driver of inequality, such a driver
Mhm.
of the disparate results that we're seeing for young people on the west side of Chicago.
Yeah. Yeah. What happens well, here my question is what happens when a kid in your program either gets in big some sort of disciplinary trouble outside of the program or it starts really doing poorly in school? Like what is the response? Do you have any point where you're just like sorry you're out or do you just continue to try to support them until things get better?
The point where we would say sorry you're out is if you're refusing to take accountability for anything that's taking place. Like if we can't even enter a process to make whatever is happening right, then we're not the people to help you. We can help you find the people who can be of import in your life, but the most important thing is like we always take accountability,
Mhm.
and we do what we so somebody gets in trouble in the program. Um, we're going through a process with them, so we figure out like who was harmed by these actions, what was the harm, what
Mhm.
were you thinking at the time, what have you thought about since then, helping them process, and then figure out what it is that they can do to make it right. So what do you do to help repair the harm that you've done
Mhm.
through your actions. So we want to take a restorative approach, and then I think a lot of people hear restorative justice and hear about restorative approaches, and they don't realize that it's actually one of the highest forms of accountability that you can have, because we
Yeah.
can punish you and say you go away for 2 weeks and then you come back and you've done nothing to fix the situation that you got into to
Right.
begin with. With a restorative approach, you often have to look in the eye of the person that you've harmed and hear about it, and then acknowledge it, and then do something
Mhm.
to fix it. And I think
Mhm.
that's a there's much more accountability in that process.
Right. Right. So there is, and I know I kind of keep hammering away at this because I think this is one of the biggest difference between what you're doing and your typical extracurricular activity at any school is there's not this your GPA has fallen below this mark, you're done. It's just now is it extra time in the study hall?
So what we have is we have young people who are getting check-ins at least every other week. Some of them, if they're in an emergency level of assessment, they're getting a check-in every week.
Mm-hmm.
With grades, there's an academic repair plan. So it starts with the student going to the school with a sheet that says like these are the things that I'm missing or I didn't do well on, and asking their teachers if they can get makeup work on those things.
Mm-hmm.
They then bring that to the block and before boxing training every day. That's what they're doing for the first 45 minutes with the support of staff and volunteers. If that doesn't work, then we can reach out either to parents or to the school to see if we can, to see what other steps that we need to be taken to support that young person's growth and development.
Mm-hmm.
We try to put as much of it on to the fighter as possible, but also maintain an open communication with the schools so that we can just be of support. We're reaching out also to outside resources for tutoring, so subject specific tutoring. We do a good enough job at like homework help, but when somebody really needs help at trigonometry, I'm done. So
You need help then.
yeah, so we an area where we're going to need some more support is like that subject specific remediation process for young people. But as of
Mm-hmm.
right now, there's a lot of good that's coming from putting it into their hands so that they can go and find the things that they need to do, bring those things back to the block, and get the support that they need to
Mm-hmm.
complete it to satisfaction.
And I should mention you do have a pretty big staff of people, and it looks like a lot of them do have a background in education of some kind. Or they're
education.
alumni of the program at this
Yeah,
point
yeah,
too.
we have quite a few alumni on staff. We lots of folks with education and youth development backgrounds.
Mm,
We're looking to expand on the number of social workers on staff. So
hmm.
that's going to be our next. I have an idea to hire a social work team. People think I'm out of my mind, but I'm ready to roll on that. So that may be what's next for us.
Do you ever have kids come to you and say, "It looks like you all are having such a good time, but I have no interest in boxing"? Like, what do you tell them?
Yeah, there are people who just like want to hang out. They want to.
Yeah,
It seems like something good for them. They want to be around, and unfortunately, we're not in a space where we can say like, "Hey, come on in," and just like go into one of our team time rooms and hang out and play board games and things of that nature.
yeah.
What we are starting to do is partner with other organizations. So we're going to partner with Chicago Run. They do running clubs for kids, and they have
Hmm.
a team building social emotional learning component that goes along with it. So every week there's a focus, and they're going on their runs and reflecting on that focus. Where we Oh, it's a little early to talk about this one. I don't know if it's going to work out, but I'm gonna put it out there in the world. We really want a partnership with Kitchen Possible. So what we did with our young people and at 10 weeks where they're cooking the same meal and then putting on a restaurant, that's what they do. They have young
All the
people,
time. Yeah.
yeah, work on recipes week over week to come out with their finished product. And they probably do it better than us. So I'm reaching out to them to see if we can get a partnership going. We're working with urban initiatives for how do I say this? It's like a month of play where young people are going to different organizations and just
Mm,
doing the thing that they do
hmm.
for a day and then ending that in a field day. So the we're going to get stronger through partnerships. We're going to get stronger by working with people and organizations that can bring in resources that are going to benefit the entire community, not just the
Right.
kids who want to fight.
Yeah. That sort of answers my next question because I'm thinking there are going to be people listening to this and going, "I love this model. I am not athletic. I don't know how to box. How can I do this same thing with some other idea?" And it sounds like your number one principle is find something the kids are actually going to be excited about.
Yeah, you really listen. You
Yeah.
listen and you go after what you hear. You also have to take a look at your strengths, right? There,
Mm,
I had a teacher ask like, "How can I do this at my school?" So you don't. You absolutely don't. You do the thing that you are great at, and if you have a passion for it, you're going to find other people who have
yeah.
a passion for it. You cannot what you can't do is try to create something for every kid, which is
Mm,
there's going to be something for every kid if we all focus on what we do best. I love piano. I should not start a piano club. I love to sing. I'm terrible at it. I should never start a choir, right? But I was a
hmm.
national champion boxer with a master's degree in education. So I get to combine those two things
Perfect
on a
fit.
day to day. So
Yeah.
really find your strengths, see where your strengths align with the young people that you're in contact with, listen to what it is that they want, and use that as your guide to help support them.
I love it. I love it. So before we finish up, something else that you've talked about, and I'd love to close with this idea, is terms like disadvantaged and at risk, because that's the population of kids that you have reached, and they often get those labels about how we should not be using those labels. Can you say more about that and what you think is a better alternative? And
I like thinking about this through the lens of Chicago right now because I'm thinking a lot
Mhm.
about the city with the mayoral election coming up. And in
Mm,
Chicago, Black people came to the city as refugees fleeing racial terror in the South. They got to Chicago. They were told they could only live in these certain neighborhoods that were segregated. When the neighborhoods started becoming segregated, there were red lines, literal red lines were drawn around those neighborhoods, and those areas did not get loans. Property values start going down. The tax base starts decreasing. The services, the education system, everything starts to go down. Businesses start to leave, and we look at those areas now and call the kids at risk. It wasn't a passive thing that happened. There were so many intentional, malicious government actions that took place to get to this point. And to say at risk makes a passive statement like they've done something to deserve it. When in
mm,
reality, something has been done to them. It'd be more appropriate to call them under siege, be more
mhm,
appropriate to call them under attack than at
mm,
risk. So the calling a kid at risk or even underserved, underprivileged, one, underserved. That means that people are overserved, but we don't call other people overserved, and that's what it would be. It would be a more accurate depiction of what's happening. But we are saddling them with a label and with a burden that we've placed on them. We have, and they've done nothing to earn that. They haven't done anything to earn that. So I'm much more of a fan of describing young people in a way that they've earned, in a way that when you come into me, you're being determined, right? When you come into me, you're taking accountability for your life. When you're coming to me, you're being ambitious, you're being responsible, you're being peaceful, you're being all these things that aren't at risk. And, it would piss me off as a kid to go to an organization, spend my time, growing and learning and doing the best that I could, and then have them call me at risk. Having described me in that way is so reductive to a circumstance that I had nothing to do with. I didn't earn that. I am an individual. I should not be lumped into this group. So I think it's really important that we watch the way we talk about kids, because the way we talk about kids also informs the services that we provide. And the services you'll accept for an at-risk kid are different than the services you would accept for an ambitious kid or a gifted kid. There's a lower level of services that we find acceptable all of a sudden when a kid is at risk versus when a kid is determined.
Yeah. Yeah. If somebody wants to learn more about the Bloc and what you do, what's the best place to send them?
You can follow us on Instagram at the Bloc Chicago. We are the Bloc Chicago on Facebook as well. You can go to theblocchicago.org. We have lots of great information on our website. The Bloc has no K in it, BLOC. Please remember that. And I hope you follow us. I hope you stay in touch. I hope you come to love the kids on the west side of Chicago that we're working with every day, the way that we do, because they're awesome. And you're going to see so much talent, growth, hope from these kids that I think is going to add to your day. So follow us on social media.
Thank you so much for giving me what is apparently a very rare opportunity to appear on a podcast.
Yes, I've done a podcast interview now, so I'm glad to do it.
To read a transcript of our interview and find links to take you to the Bloc, visit cultofpedagogy.com, click podcast, and choose episode 207. To get a bi-monthly email from me about my newest blog posts, podcast episodes, courses, and products, sign up for my mailing list at cultofpedagogy.com/subscribe. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great day.